There's only one person in my life who makes me dread waking up every morning, and that person is my boss, Calvin Wright. I know it sounds dramatic, but it's the truth. Every single day before I step into the office, I have to mentally prepare myself for his cold stares, his cutting remarks, and those emails that always start with, "Dave, this is unacceptable," or "redo this entirely." It's not just criticism, it's systematic torture. Sometimes I wonder if he hired me just to have someone to belittle every day, like I'm his personal stress ball. Today was no different. I'd spent the entire weekend working on a presentation for our client meeting. I thought it was good, really good. But when I placed the file on his desk this morning and asked, "Calvin, if there are any changes you need, just let me know," he barely glanced at it before saying, "This is garbage, Dave. Do you even understand basic design principles?" My heart sank. I tried to keep my voice steady as I replied, "I've been working really hard on this, sir." But he was already looking at his phone, dismissing me like I was invisible. Like my effort meant absolutely nothing. I excused myself to the bathroom, where I locked myself in a stall and fought back tears. I wasn't going to cry over this. I refused to give him that satisfaction. But after months of this treatment, I was reaching my breaking point. The workday dragged on painfully. I revised the presentation 3 times, each version met with more criticism. By 5 o'clock, I felt completely drained. When I finally got home to my small apartment, I collapsed onto my couch, emotionally exhausted. That's when I noticed my phone lighting up on the coffee table. 1 missed call. Calvin Wright, and a voicemail. My stomach twisted. Great. Even after work hours, he was finding ways to make my life miserable. I figured it was probably another lecture about the presentation. Or maybe he was giving me a heads up that I'd be fired on Monday. With a heavy sigh, I pressed play on the voicemail, bracing myself for whatever harsh words were coming. But what I heard made my entire world stop spinning. "Dave." His voice came through, slow and heavy, clearly intoxicated. I never told you. I don't hate you. I'm in love with you. You idiot." I froze. My finger hovered over the delete button, but I couldn't move. "Every single day," he continued, his words slurring slightly. "I have to control myself when you're standing in front of me. I want to kiss you so badly when you're explaining your ideas, when you get that excited look in your eyes. I never wanted to hurt you. This whole act, it was just a mask. Your smile, that awkward laugh you do when you're nervous. Everything about you is perfect. You're perfect, Dave." There was a long pause, and I could hear him breathing shakily on the other end. "I'm so sorry," his voice cracked, raw with emotion. "I'm sorry for everything, but I'm in love with you. I've been in love with you for months." The voicemail ended abruptly. I sat there on my couch, phone clutched in my trembling hand, trying to process what I'd just heard. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Calvin Wright, my cold, harsh, impossible boss, was in love with me. The man who criticized every breath I took, who made me question my abilities every single day, was in love with me. My mind raced through every interaction we'd had over the past 6 months. The way he'd sometimes look at me for just a second too long before turning away. How his jaw would tighten whenever another coworker complimented my work. The time he'd stayed late to help me fix a technical issue, standing so close I could smell his cologne, before abruptly leaving without a word. It all made a horrible, painful kind of sense now. He wasn't treating me terribly because he hated me. He was treating me terribly because he was trying to suppress his feelings. He was pushing me away to protect himself. And maybe to protect me too. But that didn't make it okay. That didn't erase the months of belittlement, the constant criticism, the way he'd made me feel worthless. My emotions swirled between anger, confusion, and something else I couldn't quite name. Something warm that was blooming in my chest despite everything. I played the voicemail again and again. Each time his words hit differently. "You're perfect, Dave. I'm in love with you." The vulnerability in his voice was something I'd never heard before. This wasn't the controlled, professional Calvin Wright I knew. This was someone broken, someone struggling, someone who'd been hiding behind a cruel facade. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios in my head. What would I say to him tomorrow? Should I pretend I never heard it? Should I confront him? What if this was just drunken nonsense and he didn't mean any of it? But even as I thought that, I knew it wasn't true. There was too much pain in his voice, too much genuine emotion for it to be meaningless rambling. By the time my alarm went off at 6 in the morning, I still hadn't decided what to do. I got ready on autopilot, my stomach churning with anxiety. Part of me wanted to call in sick, to avoid this confrontation entirely. But I couldn't hide forever. Whatever was going to happen, it needed to happen today. As I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, adjusting my tie for the third time, I studied my own reflection. My eyes had dark circles under them from lack of sleep. I looked as exhausted as I felt. But beneath that exhaustion there was something else. A flicker of hope. Maybe, or curiosity, or something more dangerous. Because despite everything Calvin had put me through, despite the months of harsh treatment and constant criticism, I realized something that scared me. I cared about him too. Somewhere along the way, I'd developed feelings for him that I'd buried deep because they seemed impossible. Unprofessional, completely inappropriate, but now those feelings were rising to the surface, demanding to be acknowledged. I grabbed my phone and stared at the voicemail notification one more time. This tiny message had changed everything. My relationship with Calvin could never go back to what it was before. Even if we tried to pretend this never happened, I would always know. I would always wonder. Taking a deep breath, I pocketed my phone and headed out the door. The morning air was crisp and cold, matching the anxiety freezing my insides. As I walked to the subway station, I kept rehearsing what I might say. Calvin, about last night, or we need to talk about your voicemail. Or maybe just a simple, did you mean it? But no matter how I phrased it in my head, nothing felt right. How do you confront someone about a drunken confession of love when that person is also your boss? When that person has made your work life miserable for months? When you might actually have feelings for them too? By the time I reached the office building, my hands were shaking. I stood outside for a moment, looking up at the towering structure of glass and steel. Somewhere up there on the 15th floor, Calvin was probably already at his desk, maybe nursing a hangover, maybe regretting everything he'd said last night. There was only one way to find out. I pushed through the revolving doors and headed toward the elevator, my heart racing with every step. Today was going to change everything. One way or another, the elevator ride to the 15th floor felt like descending into hell rather than ascending to my workplace. My reflection in the polished metal doors showed someone who looked like they'd been through a war, which, emotionally speaking, I had been. I checked my phone one last time before the doors opened, half hoping for a text from Calvin canceling our usual morning briefing. Nothing. When I stepped onto our floor, the office was already buzzing with activity. Sarah from accounting waved at me cheerfully, completely oblivious to my internal crisis. I forced a smile and made my way to my desk, deliberately taking the long route to avoid passing Calvin's office. I needed a few more minutes to gather my thoughts, but those minutes never came. Dave. His voice cut through the morning chatter like a blade. My office. Now, I turned to see Calvin standing in his doorway, looking absolutely terrible. His eyes were bloodshot and ringed with dark circles that matched mine. His usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled, and his tie was loose around his neck. He looked like he hadn't slept any better than I had, and possibly for very different reasons. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second before he quickly looked away, stepping back into his office. That brief moment told me everything. He knew I'd heard the voicemail. The panic in his eyes was unmistakable. I set my bag down at my desk with trembling hands and walked toward his office, each step feeling heavier than the last. When I entered, he was standing behind his desk, his back to me, staring out the window at the city skyline. "Close the door," he said quietly. I did, and the click of the latch seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Neither of us spoke for what felt like an eternity. I could see his reflection in the window, could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. "Calvin," I started, my voice barely above a whisper. "Last night, you called me." "I know," he interrupted, still not turning around. "I know what I did. I know what I said." "Do you remember what you said?" I asked, needing to know how much of this conversation we were going to have to reconstruct. He let out a bitter laugh. "Every word. I woke up at 3 in the morning and checked my call log. Saw your name. Saw the length of the voicemail I left. I didn't need to listen to it to know exactly what I'd said." Finally, he turned to face me, and the look in his eyes was devastating. It was raw vulnerability mixed with terror and something that looked almost like grief. It was the alcohol talking, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I wasn't in my right mind. You should delete it and forget it ever happened. Was it all lies then? I asked, stepping closer. Everything you said, was it just drunken nonsense? He flinched as if I'd struck him. Dave, please. Because if it was, I continued, my own voice growing stronger, if you didn't mean any of it, then just tell me now. Tell me you were completely out of your mind, and that none of it was true. I can't, he whispered, and those two words hung in the air between us like a confession. I can't tell you it wasn't true because it was. All of it. My breath caught in my throat. Hearing him say it sober, in the harsh light of day, was completely different from the voicemail. This was real. This was happening. Then why? I demanded, and I hated how my voice cracked. Why have you been treating me like I'm worthless? Why do you criticize everything I do? Why do you make me feel like I'm failing constantly when apparently you feel this way about me? Calvin's composure finally shattered. He leaned back against his desk, his hands gripping the edge so tightly his knuckles turned white. Because I'm your superior, Dave. Because this is wrong on every professional level. Because if I was kind to you, if I let myself be close to you, I wouldn't be able to control it. I wouldn't be able to stop myself from— He cut himself off, shaking his head. The distance was necessary. The coldness was necessary. It was the only way I could function. That's not fair, I said, and I could feel tears burning in my eyes. You made me miserable. You made me doubt myself every single day. Do you have any idea what that's been like? I know, he said, his own voice thick with emotion. I know, and I hate myself for it. Every harsh word, every criticism, it killed me to say them. But the alternative was worse. The alternative was losing all control and jeopardizing both our careers. I took another step closer, close enough now that I could see the unshed tears in his eyes. What if I told you I don't care about the professional boundaries? What if I told you that somewhere in all of this mess I started caring about you too? His eyes widened, genuine shock replacing the anguish. You don't mean that. You can't mean that. Not after how I've treated you. I wish I didn't, I admitted. Trust me, my life would be so much easier if I didn't. But I can't help how I feel, Calvin. And honestly, now that I know the truth, now that I know why you've been this way, I understand. I don't forgive it yet, but I understand it. He stood up straight, and for a moment I thought he might reach for me. His hand actually lifted slightly before he caught himself and let it fall back to his side. This can't happen, Dave. Even if we both feel this way, it can't happen. I'm your boss. The power dynamic alone makes this completely inappropriate. If anyone found out— I know the risks, I interrupted. I'm not naive. But I'm also not going to pretend that voicemail doesn't exist. I'm not going to pretend I don't know how you feel. We can't go back to how things were before. Then what do we do? He asked, and he sounded lost, almost helpless. It was such a contrast to his usual commanding presence that it broke my heart a little. I don't know, I admitted, but we figure it out. Together. We can start by you not treating me like garbage anymore. We can start by being honest with each other even if we can't act on these feelings right now. Calvin was quiet for a long moment, studying my face like he was trying to memorize it. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, we can try that. But Dave, if this becomes too difficult, if it puts your job at risk in any way, then we'll deal with it when it happens, I said firmly. Stop trying to protect me by pushing me away. It's not working anyway. A small, sad smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. You're braver than I am. No, I corrected. I'm just tired of being afraid. We stood there in his office, the morning sun streaming through the windows, and something shifted between us. It wasn't resolution exactly, and it certainly wasn't a happy ending. But it was a beginning. A fragile, uncertain beginning, but a beginning nonetheless. We should get to work, Calvin said finally, his professional mask starting to slip back into place, though it didn't fit quite as well as it used to. Yeah, I agreed, heading toward the door. But before I left, I turned back. Calvin, thank you for being honest with me. Finally, he nodded, and in his eyes I saw gratitude, fear, and something that might have been hope. As I walked back to my desk, my hands were still shaking, but for a different reason now. Everything had changed, and I had no idea where we were going from here. but at least we were going there together. The next few days were strange in ways I couldn't have predicted. Calvin kept his word about not treating me harshly anymore. But the change was almost more awkward than his previous cruelty. He was careful with me now, too careful. Like I was made of glass that might shatter at any moment. Every interaction was stilted and formal, laden with unspoken words and suppressed feelings. He stopped sending those cutting emails. Instead, he'd leave brief, neutral notes on my desk when he had feedback. Please adjust the color scheme, or consider revising the layout. No insults, no condescension, but also no warmth. We were both walking on eggshells, trying to navigate this impossible situation we'd created. The hardest part was the distance. Now that I knew the truth, being apart from him felt like a physical ache. I'd catch myself looking toward his office throughout the day, wondering what he was thinking, whether he was struggling as much as I was. Sometimes I'd find him already looking at me, and we'd both quickly avert our eyes like teenagers with a crush. It was torture of a completely different kind. By Thursday evening, I was the last one left on our floor. I'd stayed late to finish a report, grateful for the quiet and the chance to clear my head. Or at least, that's what I told myself. The truth was, I'd seen Calvin's lights still on in his office, and I couldn't bring myself to leave while he was still there. Around 8 o'clock I finally saved my work and stretched, my back aching from hours hunched over my computer. That's when I noticed his office door was slightly ajar, which was unusual. Calvin always kept it closed when he was working late. I hesitated, then decided to check if he was okay. I knocked softly on the door frame. "Calvin, are you all right?" He was slumped in his chair, elbows on his desk, his face buried in his hands. He looked utterly exhausted, defeated in a way I'd never seen before. When he looked up at me, I was struck by the depth of pain in his eyes. "Dave," he said, and my name sounded like a prayer and a curse all at once. "What are you still doing here?" "Working," I replied, stepping into his office. "What about you? You look like you haven't slept in days." "I haven't," he admitted, running a hand through his already messy hair. "Not properly, anyway. Every time I close my eyes, I see you. And when I'm awake, you're right across the office. Close enough to touch but completely out of reach." The honesty in his words took my breath away. This was the Calvin from the voicemail, vulnerable and unguarded. "You don't have to torture yourself like this," I said softly, moving closer to his desk. "Don't I?" He laughed bitterly. "What's the alternative, Dave? Acting on these feelings would be professional suicide for both of us. But pretending they don't exist is killing me slowly." I rounded his desk, drawn to him by a force I couldn't resist anymore. "Then maybe we need to find a middle ground. Something between pretending and everything else." He stood up abruptly, and suddenly we were face to face, barely a foot apart. I could see the war raging in his eyes, the battle between what he wanted and what he thought was right. "You don't understand what you're asking," he said, his voice rough. "Being this close to you, knowing how I feel, knowing how you say you feel, it takes everything I have not to." He stopped himself, his jaw clenching. "Not to what?" I challenged, taking one more step closer. "Not to do this?" I reached out and took his hand, the first time we'd had any physical contact beyond professional handshakes. The effect was electric. Calvin's breath hitched and his fingers instinctively tightened around mine. "Dave, I know we can't take this further," I interrupted. "I know the risks. I know the rules. But can't we at least acknowledge this? Can't we at least be honest about what this is when we're alone?" He looked down at our joined hands, and I saw a tear slide down his cheek. "I don't deserve your understanding. I don't deserve your kindness. Not after what I put you through." "Maybe not," I agreed, "but I'm giving it to you anyway. Because I'm starting to realize that you've been punishing yourself far more than you ever punished me." "I hurt you," he insisted, his other hand coming up to grip my shoulder, though whether to push me away or pull me closer I wasn't sure. "I made you feel worthless when you're the most valuable person in my life. How can you forgive that?" "I didn't say I forgive it," I corrected gently. "I said I understand it. Forgiveness might take time. But understanding, that started the moment I heard your voicemail." We stood there in his dimly lit office, the city lights twinkling through the window behind us, connected by our joined hands and the weight of everything we couldn't say. The air between us felt charged, heavy with possibility and restraint. "This is dangerous," Calvin whispered, but he made no move to pull away. Every moment I spend with you like this makes it harder to maintain professional boundaries tomorrow. Then let's not think about tomorrow, I suggested. Just for tonight, let's not think about the office politics or the rules or the consequences. Let's just be two people who care about each other. Two people who care about each other, he repeated, testing the words. A small, genuine smile crossed his face for the first time since I'd known him. Is that what we are? I think we might be, I said, despite everything working against us. Despite the terrible way this started. Despite all the logical reasons why this is a terrible idea. He raised our joined hands and pressed them against his chest, right over his heart. I could feel it racing beneath my palm. My heart beats like this every time you walk into a room, he confessed. It's been doing it for months. I thought I was having cardiac problems until I realized it only happened when you were near. I couldn't help but laugh, even as my own eyes filled with tears. That might be the most Calvin Wright way of realizing you have feelings for someone. His smile widened slightly. I'm not good at this. I've spent my entire adult life focused on my career. I don't know how to handle feeling this way about someone, especially when that someone is your employee, I finished. I know, but Calvin, I'm also just a person who sees you, the real you, not just the boss everyone else sees. He searched my face, his thumb absently stroking the back of my hand. What do you see when you look at me? I see someone who's scared, I answered honestly. Someone who's been hiding behind professionalism because being vulnerable terrifies them. Someone who cares so deeply that they'd rather cause pain than risk losing control. I paused, making sure he was really hearing me, but I also see someone worth caring about. Someone worth taking risks for. Dave, he breathed, and the way he said my name was different now. Softer, full of wonder and longing. You make me want to be braver. You make me want to risk everything. Then be brave, I urged. Not by crossing lines we can't uncross. But be brave enough to admit this is real. Be brave enough to stop pretending around you when we're alone. He was quiet for a long moment, just looking at me with those intense eyes that had once intimidated me and now made my heart race for entirely different reasons. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, he said. Okay, I can do that. When we're alone, no more pretending, no more masks. Just us, I agreed. He finally reluctantly released my hand and stepped back, though his eyes never left mine. You should go home. It's late. And if anyone came back and found us like this, I know, I said, even though leaving felt impossible. But Calvin, this conversation we just had, it meant everything to me. To me too, he admitted. More than you know. As I walked toward his office door, I turned back one more time. He was watching me with an expression I'd never seen before. Open, honest, and full of an emotion I was afraid to name. Good night, Calvin. Good night, Dave. The words were simple, but they felt like a promise. A promise that whatever this was between us, we were in it together now. No more hiding, no more cruelty, no more pretending, at least not when we were alone. And as I left the office and headed home through the quiet streets, I realized that despite all the complications, despite the impossible situation we'd found ourselves in, I was happier than I'd been in months. Because for the first time since I'd met Calvin Wright, I felt like I truly knew him. And he knew me too. The morning after our conversation in his office, something shifted in the air between us. Calvin's behavior began to change in small, almost imperceptible ways that made my heart skip beats throughout the day. He was still professional when others were around, maintaining that careful distance we both knew was necessary. But now there were these tiny moments, gestures so subtle that no one else would notice, but they meant everything to me. On Monday, I found a coffee on my desk when I arrived. Still warm, with a small sticky note attached. Thought you might need this. See. My hands trembled as I held the cup, remembering how he used to criticize me for drinking coffee at my desk. This felt like a peace offering, like he was trying to make up for all those months of coldness in whatever small ways he could. Tuesday brought another note, this time tucked into a project folder he returned to me. Excellent work. Your creativity continues to impress me. I read it 3 times, my chest tight with emotion. These weren't the elaborate compliments I'd once craved. They were better. They were real honest acknowledgments from someone who'd finally stopped hiding behind cruelty. Wednesday he brought me lunch when I'd skipped my break to meet a deadline. He set it on my desk without a word, just a brief touch to my shoulder that lasted maybe 2 seconds but left my skin burning through my shirt. When I looked up to thank him, he was already walking away, but I caught the smallest smile on his face. I was falling deeper, and I knew it was dangerous. Every kindness felt like a gift I didn't deserve after how I'd challenged him, pushed him to admit his feelings, but I also couldn't stop myself from wanting more of his time, more of his attention, more of these glimpses of who he really was beneath the professional exterior. By Friday, when I heard about the team dinner, my stomach dropped. Calvin never attended these gatherings. He'd always maintained strict boundaries between his personal and professional life, never socializing with employees outside the office. But when I saw his name on the attendance list, I knew he was coming because of me. The thought both thrilled and terrified me. The restaurant was one of those trendy places downtown with dim lighting and exposed brick walls. Our team of 8 sat around a large table, and somehow I ended up directly across from Calvin. It felt deliberate, though I couldn't tell if it was his doing or fate's. Everyone ordered drinks. Wine, beer, cocktails. The conversation flowed easily, people sharing stories about their weekends and complaining good-naturedly about work. I tried to focus on what Sarah was saying about her sister's wedding, but I kept getting distracted by Calvin's presence across from me. He was different here, outside the office, more relaxed. He laughed at jokes, contributed to conversations, seemed almost human instead of the intimidating boss I'd first met. And every so often, when he thought no one was looking, his eyes would find mine. Those moments felt electric, like we were sharing a secret that no one else at the table could comprehend. "Dave, you're awfully quiet tonight," Mark, from marketing, observed, pulling me from my thoughts. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I said quickly, forcing a smile. "Just tired. Long week?" "Tell me about it," Mark agreed, launching into a story about a difficult client. I nodded along, but I could feel Calvin's gaze on me, concerned and questioning. The dinner stretched on for 2 hours. By the time people started saying their goodbyes, I was exhausted from the effort of acting normal, of pretending that sitting across from Calvin wasn't affecting me in ways I couldn't show. I was gathering my coat when Calvin appeared beside me. "Dave, would you mind taking a walk with me? I could use some fresh air after being cooped up in there." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Sure," I managed to say casually, though nothing about this felt casual at all. We said goodbye to the remaining team members and stepped out into the cool night air. The street was quiet, most of the shops already closed for the evening. We walked in silence for a few minutes, our shoulders occasionally brushing as we navigated the sidewalk. "This is risky, isn't it?" Calvin finally said, his voice low. "Us being seen together outside of work. People might talk." "Let them," I replied, surprised by my own boldness. "I'm tired of caring what people think." He stopped walking and turned to face me. We were standing under a streetlight that cast harsh shadows across his features, making him look older, more worn. "You say that now, but Dave, your reputation matters. Your career matters. I won't be responsible for damaging either." "You're not responsible for my choices," I told him. "I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. Whatever that means right now." Something in his expression cracked, that carefully maintained composure he wore like armor. "You make it sound so simple, like we can just decide to feel this way and everything else will sort itself out." "Maybe it can," I suggested, though I knew it was naive. "Maybe we're overthinking this." Calvin shook his head, but he was smiling slightly. "You're an optimist. I never noticed that before. I was too busy trying not to notice anything about you." "And now?" I asked, taking a small step closer. "Now I can't stop noticing everything," he admitted. "The way you bite your lip when you're concentrating. How you always arrive exactly 7 minutes early to work. The fact that you take your coffee with way too much sugar and not enough cream." I laughed softly. "That's kind of creepy, boss." "I know," he said, and there was no humor in his voice now, just raw honesty. "I know it's inappropriate and unprofessional and probably crossing every boundary that should exist between us. But Dave, I can't help it. Being near you, knowing how you feel, it's driving me insane. Every night I think about you. Every morning I have to remind myself why I can't just—" He cut himself off abruptly, his jaw clenching. "Can't just what?" I prompted, my voice barely above a whisper. Calvin reached out and took my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine. The touch sent electricity racing up my arm. Can't just throw everything away to be with you the way I want to. Because if we do this, Dave, I need to do it right. I need to protect you from the fallout. I need to make sure you don't regret choosing me. The vulnerability in his words made my throat tight. I could never regret you. He raised our joined hands and pressed them against his chest, and I could feel his heart racing beneath my palm. You say that now, but there are consequences we haven't even considered yet. Office politics, company policies, people who might try to use this against you. I don't care, I interrupted firmly. Calvin, I don't care about any of that. All I care about is this us. Right here, right now. He studied my face for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. Then he did something that took my breath away. He brought my hand to his lips and pressed a soft kiss to my knuckles, his eyes never leaving mine. You're too good for me, he whispered against my skin. Too patient, too understanding, too brave. I don't deserve you, Dave. But I'm selfish enough to want you anyway. The week after our walk changed everything. Calvin started finding ways to spend time with me outside the office. Always carefully planned to avoid places where we might run into colleagues. On Tuesday evening, he texted me an address. A small cafe on the other side of town that I'd never heard of. When I arrived, I found him already seated in a corner booth, 2 cups of coffee waiting on the table. He'd remembered how I took mine, and that small detail made my chest ache with affection. This is nice, I said, sliding into the seat across from him. Hidden gem? Something like that, he replied, a slight smile playing at his lips. I needed somewhere we could actually talk. Really talk, without worrying about who might overhear. And we did talk. For 3 hours we sat in that cafe and shared pieces of ourselves we'd never revealed before. He told me about his childhood, about the pressure to succeed that had driven him to become the youngest department head in the company's history. I told him about my own insecurities, about how his initial treatment of me had confirmed every doubt I'd ever had about my abilities. I'm sorry, he said quietly, when I finished. I know I've apologized before, but I need you to understand. I never meant to make you feel inadequate. You were brilliant from day one. That's what scared me. Thursday brought a late-night drive. He picked me up at 11 and we headed out of the city with no particular destination in mind. The highway stretched endlessly before us, and for the first time in months, I felt completely free. We talked about everything and nothing. Movies, music, dreams we'd given up on, and ones we were too afraid to pursue. I always wanted to paint, I admitted at one point. Not professionally or anything, just for myself. But I convinced myself I wasn't talented enough. Calvin glanced at me, his hands steady on the wheel. You should start again. Life's too short to deny yourself things that bring you joy. Is that what you're doing? I asked. With us, I mean choosing joy over fear. He was quiet for a moment. I'm trying to, it doesn't come naturally to me. Letting go of control. But with you, I want to try. By Friday we'd fallen into a pattern that felt both thrilling and terrifying. During work hours we maintained perfect professionalism, but the moment we were alone, the masks came off completely. Then came the meeting that changed everything. It was a standard departmental review with several senior managers present. I was presenting a proposal I'd worked on for weeks, confident in my research and recommendations. But one of the managers, Gerald Hutchins, who'd never liked me, decided to use the meeting as an opportunity to put me in my place. Dave, these projections seem overly optimistic, he said, his tone dripping with condescension. Perhaps you should focus on deliverables that are actually achievable for someone at your level. Your performance reviews have been mediocre at best. Maybe aim for competent before trying for innovative. The room fell silent. I felt my face flush with humiliation, my carefully prepared words dissolving on my tongue. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but before I could speak, Calvin's voice cut through the tension like a blade. That's enough, Gerald. Everyone turned to look at him. Calvin was standing now, his posture rigid with barely contained anger. I'd never seen him like this, protective and fierce in a way that made my heart stop. Dave's projections are based on solid research and market analysis, Calvin continued, his voice cold and precise. His work has consistently exceeded expectations. In fact, his performance reviews show marked improvement each quarter, which you would know if you'd actually read them instead of making assumptions. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. Dave is one of our most valuable team members. I won't tolerate this kind of unprofessional behavior toward him or anyone else on my team. Gerald's face turned red, but he said nothing. Calvin gestured for me to continue my presentation, and somehow I managed to stumble through the rest of it, though I could barely concentrate with my heart pounding so hard. The meeting ended shortly after. As people filed out, I caught whispers, speculation about Calvin's unusual defensiveness, questions about favoritism. My stomach twisted with anxiety. This was exactly what we'd been trying to avoid. Later that afternoon, my colleague Jennifer pulled me aside. "Dave, can I ask you something?" She kept her voice low, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "Is there something going on between you and Calvin? He's never defended anyone like that before. People are starting to notice." "He's just being fair," I said quickly, my palms sweating. "There's nothing going on," but the look in her eyes told me she didn't believe me. And why would she? Calvin had shown his hand today, revealed too much of what he felt in that moment of protective anger. That evening, he called me into his office after everyone else had left. The tension was palpable as I closed the door behind me. "We need to talk about what happened today," he said, running a hand through his hair in obvious frustration. "I lost control. I shouldn't have been so obvious about defending you. You were protecting me," I said softly. "That's not a crime. It is when it puts your career at risk," he countered. "People are going to talk, Dave. They're going to question whether you've earned your position or if I'm showing favoritism. Your reputation could suffer because I couldn't keep my feelings in check." I moved closer to his desk. "So what are you saying? That we should go back to pretending? Start keeping distance again?" "No," he said immediately, then softer. "I don't know. Maybe we need to be more careful, more strategic about how we handle this at work." My phone buzzed with a text. Then another. I pulled it out and saw messages from coworkers. Some curious, some concerned, all asking variations of the same question about my relationship with Calvin. "It's already too late for careful," I said, showing him my phone. "People are already talking. So what do we do now?" Calvin stared at the messages, his expression pained. "I'm sorry. This is my fault. I should have controlled myself better." "Stop apologizing for caring about me," I said firmly. "I'm not sorry about today. You stood up for me when no one else would. That means something, Calvin." He looked at me with such intensity that I felt it in my bones. "You mean something to me?" "Everything, actually. That's the problem. How am I supposed to maintain professional boundaries when just the thought of someone hurting you makes me want to?" He stopped himself, shaking his head. That night, he called me after midnight. I was already in bed, unable to sleep, staring at the ceiling and replaying the day's events. "I've been thinking," he said without preamble, "about us, about the office, about everything. And I keep coming back to the same conclusion." "Which is?" I asked, my heart in my throat. "That I love you, Dave." The words hung in the air between us, monumental and terrifying. It was the first time he'd said it while sober, while fully aware of what he was admitting. "I love you," he repeated, his voice stronger now. "And I don't want to hide anymore. I don't want to pretend that you're just another employee. But I also don't want to hate you. And I'm terrified that's exactly what I'm doing." My eyes burned with unexpected tears. "I love you too," I whispered. "And we'll figure this out together. We have to." The next 2 weeks were among the hardest of my life. Calvin had secretly consulted with HR, trying to find a way forward that wouldn't jeopardize either of our careers. The news wasn't good. Company policy strictly prohibited romantic relationships between supervisors and their direct reports. If we wanted to be together officially, one of us would have to transfer to a different department or leave the company entirely. The weight of that knowledge sat heavy on both of us. I could see it in the way Calvin's shoulders slumped when he thought I wasn't looking, in the tired lines around his eyes that deepened each day. We were both being crushed under the impossibility of our situation. Then came the night that forced everything to a head. Calvin invited me to his apartment, the first time I'd been to his place. When I arrived, I was surprised to find candles lit on the dining table, 2 place settings arranged carefully, and the smell of mom-cooked food filling the air. "You cooked?" I asked, touched by the effort. I wanted tonight to be special, he said, pulling out a chair for me. Because I need to tell you something and I wanted the setting to be right. We ate mostly in silence, the tension building with each passing minute. Finally, when we'd both pushed our half-finished plates away, Calvin reached across the table and took my hands in his. I've made a decision, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. I'm going to step down from my position. I'll request a lateral move to a non-supervisory role in a different department. That way, you can stay where you are, keep your career trajectory intact, and we can be together without violating company policy. I stared at him in shock. Calvin, no. You worked for years to get where you are. You earned that position. I can't let you give it up for me. You're not letting me do anything, he said gently. This is my choice. Dave, I've spent my entire adult life climbing the corporate ladder, sacrificing everything for career advancement. And for what? An impressive title? A corner office? None of it means anything compared to you. But you love your work, I protested, my voice breaking. You're brilliant at what you do. People respect you. You can't just throw that away. I'm not throwing it away, he corrected. I'm reprioritizing. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing something that actually matters. Someone who actually matters. Tears spilled down my cheeks. If you do this, I'll never forgive myself. Every time I look at you, I'll remember what you sacrificed. How is that fair to either of us? Calvin stood and came around the table, kneeling beside my chair so we were eye level. He wiped my tears with his thumbs, his touch impossibly gentle. Listen to me. You are not a sacrifice. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. This job, this position, it'll still be here in some form. But you, Dave, you're irreplaceable. I'd give up everything before I'd give you up. That night, I stayed at his apartment. We didn't sleep together. Not in that way. Instead, we lay on his couch, wrapped in each other's arms, and talked until the sun came up. He told me about his fears, about how terrified he was of making the wrong choice. I told him about mine, about how guilty I felt for disrupting his life. But by morning, we both understood that some things were inevitable. We couldn't keep hiding. We couldn't keep pretending. Something had to change. The next day, Calvin met with HR without telling me. When he called me into his office that afternoon, I expected the worst. Instead, he looked almost relieved. They found a solution, he said, gesturing for me to sit. You'll be transferred to report to Margaret Chen in the creative division. We'll no longer have a direct supervisor-employee relationship. It satisfies the policy requirements while allowing both of us to maintain our current levels and salaries. I felt like I could breathe for the first time in weeks. When? Effective immediately. HR is processing the paperwork now. He paused, studying my face. Are you okay with this? I know you like our current team. I'm more than okay, I said, unable to stop smiling. This means we can actually be together. Openly. If you still want that, he said quietly. After everything I've put you through, I wouldn't blame you if. I stood and walked around his desk, cupping his face in my hands. Calvin Wright. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I want this. I want us. The kiss we shared was soft and sweet and full of promise. Our first real kiss. The beginning of something that no longer had to hide in shadows. That Friday, Calvin did something that took more courage than I'd known he possessed. During the team lunch, with everyone gathered around the table, he made an announcement. I want you all to know that Dave will be transferring to Margaret's team starting Monday. But before he goes, I need to say something. He took my hand right there in front of everyone, his fingers twining with mine. Dave and I are in a relationship. I know this might come as a surprise to some of you, and I want to assure you that everything has been handled appropriately through HR. I hope you'll all be supportive as we navigate this new chapter. The reactions were mixed. Some genuine smiles, some confused looks, a few whispers. But Jennifer was the first to stand up and hug me, whispering, "I knew it," in my ear, with a laugh. Others followed, offering congratulations and support. After lunch, as we walked out of the building together for the first time as a couple, Calvin pulled me close and kissed my forehead right there on the busy street. "No more hiding," he murmured against my skin. "No more pretending. Just us, just us." I agreed, my heart so full it felt like it might burst. Finally, and as we walked hand in hand into whatever came next, I knew that every difficult moment, every tear, every fear had been worth it, because this being with him openly, honestly, completely, this was everything I'd ever wanted. Our story wasn't ending. It was just beginning.